Zevlor's Sleep Stories. Performed by Glenn Macready. The Tower by Plumpkin. Now, what's this? I thought I could hear someone still up and about. Lo and behold, the light from your lantern proves me right. It's a fine night with not a cloud in the sky to obscure this vast ocean of stars. But while I can't fault you for wanting to appreciate it, it is getting rather late. Can't settle, can you? I suppose it's no wonder, given all that must be on your mind. Well, if you'll allow me to sit beside you, perhaps I can be of some help. It might surprise you to know that while I served within the Oturian Hell Riders, I picked up a trick or two for relaxing the body and calming the mind. Take your time and get comfortable. Whatever comfortable is for you. In bed or on the sofa, wherever you find yourself. Feel the weight of blankets over you as you lie safe and swept up in their warmth. Think on the heaviness of your head sinking down into your pillow, and the way it beckons you to stay a while with the softest scents of lavender and clove oil. Turn your mind towards the stillness of the air around you and the respite that you find there. Quiet at last. This is a time just for you that you can spend free of expectations, of demands, and thoughts of future plans. Now, I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes. Take a deep, long breath, filling your lungs. Hold it just for a moment, and then exhale again, nice and slow and steady, releasing all the tension from your body. Again, once more, breathe in, feeling yourself growing lighter as your chest expands. Hold it, and then let it out with a sigh as slowly as you can. Now, start at the top of your head and make yourself aware of all the muscles of your face, the ones in your forehead, all smoothing out as you let go of tension. Even the smallest ones around your eyes, all settling into perfect serenity. Remember to unclench your jaw as you work through. I see you still gritting your teeth. Then I want you to think down your neck to your shoulders, allowing your mind to flow through your body like a river, as it carries with it that ability to relax, sharing it with each part of you it touches. I want you to become aware of the heaviness of your limbs, releasing all the tension from your arms, at your sides, traveling down your forearms to your wrists, and all the way to the tip of each finger. Then lazily think back up to your chest, take another breath in, the deepest you can manage. Hold. Now let go. Noting that all the stiffness you've been holding yourself with is draining away until it feels as if a weight has been lifted and you can breathe more deeply and more calmly than ever before. Notice, too, that as you experience that sensation, your breathing grows even slower, so slow that it's as if you're asleep already, being carried on a dream further and further away from anything and everything that is troubling you, to a place where you can simply exist just as you are, unbothered, free. From your chest, I want you to take your awareness down to your torso, unclenching your stomach muscles and just letting yourself sink deeper and deeper into whatever cozy, comfortable surface you are lying on. Allow yourself to embrace that feeling of safety, of inner peace, as you drift along to the sound of my voice. Let the same relaxation that's been steadily settling over you now spread through your hips, down through your thighs, all the way to your calves and each foot. Every note of tension is fading into blissful nothingness, like the last wisps of smoke from a candle disappearing into the night. Your limbs are heavy now, so much so that even if you wanted to lift them, you might just find yourself unable to. All you can think about now is how comfortable you are, how safe and at peace you feel. And now that your muscles are so completely and utterly relaxed, each breath you take comes slower and slower. You find it's easier to let your mind clear. All those stressful things in life, big and small, are slowly slipping away. Indeed, you've been through a lot, my friend, and you have borne it with the courage of a lion and the patience of a saint. But right now, here in this time, you do not need to be brave. Now all I need from you is for you to listen to me as I recount to you a tale from my early soldiering days. The year I speak of is 1448. The sky was a mixed palette of swathes of oranges, pinks, and honeyed yellows. The sun itself struggled to keep awake as it sank beneath the horizon. My fellow hell riders and I watched from horseback as the last of the day slipped through our fingers like the finest of sands, The forest we were riding through, growing cold and dark. Still we were without choice, and so stubbornly pressed on through tangles of thickets and thorn, gnarled, twisting branches, and curtains of emerald pine needles hanging over our heads. We were returning from an escort to Sekoma, a small but prestigious town east of Waterdeep, home to farmers, merchants, and travelers who had become enamored enough by its charm to settle. If you are familiar with Elturel's position on the Sword Coast, you will know the journey there was a long one in its own right. But the way back, though we trod the same path, felt double the distance. Yet, as we and our horses neared total collapse, our prayers to find a suitable place to make camp for the night were at last answered. The surrounding foliage that had been a constant veil since we entered the forest now finally began to open up to us, bringing into view a hill so impressive you'll forgive me for exaggerating and insisting it to be a mountain instead. Though it was not the hill that filled us with such relief, but the sight atop its crest, the silhouette of a great stone tower punctured the sky, stretching like a tall shadow towards the descending darkness and backlit by the pallid moon. Not a single light shone from within, and as we grew nearer, we could see how the walls crumbled, blackened and charred, and in places lacked a stone or two, the gaps poorly stitched over by winding tendrils of ivy. I put the idea to my comrades that it might be abandoned, and was met with agreement, all the more convenient for us. After we tied up our horses with care, we left them to graze while we began our cautious investigation of the entrance. The door stood stubbornly shut, despite its rusty lock and rotted wood. It rejected our every attempt to open it, whether by force or picking with what little tools we had to hand. We stood there vexed, until our cleric eventually suggested it being arcane. Given the circumstances, the rest of us had no objection to them at least trying, and sure enough, a simple murmured incantation of knock by their hand proved to be our answer at last. Whatever imperceptible magical chains bound the door buckled, splintered, and finally yielded their power. The last remains of the spell shattered into silver shards, visible unfettered threads of the weave, freed to roam as they pleased. That fleeting, wondrous sight was perhaps wasted on our youthful impatience as we unceremoniously bustled inside, brandishing torches to gain some sense of our surroundings. Although the darkness hid many a detail, I was still able to make out enough to judge the interior as unremarkably dull. Cracked flagstones, painted with moss, paved the floor, some with abstract patterns chiseled into their faces, but lack of maintenance and nature reclaiming her territory had erased the intricacies. Stepping over them, we happily found sconces still intact along the walls to hold our torches, so we might finally rest our aching shoulders. As they slotted into place, the cold grey of the room turned a rusty shade of amber. The shadows cast by firelight, deep and imposing, even while their warmth spoke of sanctuary. Inevitably a draught crept in from the fractures in the walls, but by some small miracle the roof was intact. It wasn't long before we established our modest camp within, and our minds were free to wonder more about the place we had made ourselves comfortable in. The singed walls and floor led one of our numbers to suggest the tower had once been inhabited by a reclusive wizard, until he fumbled a powerful spell and had been consumed by his magic. Another insisted it must have been a recently forgotten waypoint for previous generations of Hell Riders, and the burn marks from a particularly vigorous sparring match. You will now realize how starved we all were for entertainment when I tell you it sparked an argument entirely too fierce for the subject matter. I admit, after almost getting hit with a flame myself, I finally snapped at them, nerves frayed from having been on the road with those two soldiers in particular for far too long. Unbecoming as the outburst was, it was then at least agreed that the solution to the quarrel was simple. We would search the tower and seek out any traces of its former occupant. I cannot claim to have been thrilled at the prospect of dragging my feet around when all I cared to do was be done with this foolishness and turn into my bedroll, but I had my concerns of leaving them to their own devices. It was also better than being between another roughhousing, so I begrudgingly became a participant in their quest. We had better vision now that our camp was established, thank dawn. It made scouring the room for clues an easier task than it would otherwise have been. Still, though, there was little to go off. Some shelves caught our eye at first, but none of us needed to take more than a cursory glance to see they were only occupied by old teapots, withering incense sticks, and the odd unremarkable trinket. We also observed empty crates, stacked hither and thither, with no trace of what they once carried. Beside them, broken chairs, what was left of their limbs tossed in a careless pile that, when sifted through, yielded nothing of note. Even the most promising lead we uncovered, a weary old desk, cruelly taunted us with naught but a snapped quill and a single sheet of bare, yellowed parchment. Frustrations ran high. I, at least, was prepared to abandon this fruitless endeavor, when it be through divine intervention or some buried instinct it just so happened to enter my head to cast a minor incantation of fairy fire on the parchment. As soon as the first whisper of light filled my hand, words began to unravel. Araloth, should you be sensible enough to think to look for this letter, this place is done for. If you make it back here after we've fled, gather all you can and meet me where the river forks. These words will help you find your way. Me aduce larem. I read it aloud for the sake of the others, and no sooner did I speak the final syllable than a large archway materialized on the wall nearest to us. It shimmered and sparkled like a pool of water, emanating a gentle turquoise light that bled into the warm orange of the torch-lit room. As the portal settled, the letter in my hand suddenly felt hot, burning the tips of my fingers as if I had just fished it out of a furnace. I hurried to toss it away, and we all watched as it curled, blackened, and crumbled into ashes before it even hit the floor. Flecks of grey dusting the flagstones. It would appear this Araloth, whoever they were, wasn't as sensible as the letter-writer had hoped. Just as I had begun to process what had happened, one of the bull-headed soldiers who had gotten us into this escapade breezed past my side with their hand extended towards the portal. Before anyone could stop them, they reached inside the opaque barrier, their arm disappearing up to the shoulder, waiting but half a second before turning and reassuring us the gateway was safe. All the scolding I was prepared to give them for their recklessness perished on my tongue as the fool stepped straight on through, swallowed up by the passage. For a long, hair-raising moment, the remainder of us simply stared after them, expecting the worst, only to be shortly beckoned forward with an impatient shout. After exchanging a brief glance, the other two shrugged and made the traverse themselves. The moments in solitude ticked onward, and, after hesitating a moment less than I probably ought to have, I, too, left behind the safety of our camp to venture into the unknown. I'm sure you have passed through many a dimensional door in your lifetime, my adventuring friend, but I must ask you to humor me for just a moment, for that was my first time experiencing such a sensation. It was unlike any other terrain I had ever crossed. The air around me was somehow thick as treacle to wade through, and yet gave me the most peculiar sensation of floating in an endless, boundless sea of sights and sounds, all at once familiar and unknown. It must have been a matter of moments that I was in such a liminal space, but while inside it, it was as if time had slowed to a crawl. At last, though, my surroundings began to shift, slowly at first, then all at once. Disoriented, I stumbled a few steps until I found my balance and looked up, relieved to find myself by my fellow soldiers. I then stopped and looked around my new surroundings with awe. This room was far longer than that which we had come from. Above our heads was an elegant silver chandelier, its wiry arms encrusted with crystals that spilled downwards like a frozen waterfall. The glow of their cores bathed the room in ethereal light. By contrast, the rest of the room was not nearly as glamorous. The walls were still just as unevenly bricked with stone as the tower, and were plastered with overlapping sheets of varying sizes and shapes of parchment, crassly drawn maps, scribbled instructions, or in one case what looked to be an angry exchange of notes, a dagger jammed through the last. Broken globes and cracked decorative vases sat next to empty plant pots and end tables cloaked with dust. Rugs so trodden with grime their original tapestries couldn't be made out, piled on the floor in eclectic heaps. Bookcases, some near empty and some with shelves bulging under the weight of their collections. Tarnished candelabras, laid forgotten on their sides, tucked under blankets of cobwebs. Despite being the last in, I was the first to move, legs starting up of their own accord and unsure of their destination. I found it at last, or perhaps it found me, at a broad oak desk. Upon it was a large leather-bound book that rested with its covers opened, yellowed pages inviting my eye. I was unable to make out much of the writing. Whoever wrote it had dragged their quill so forcefully against the page that it had almost torn in some places, ink blots smearing across every word. But I could read enough. This place, a thieves' den. Its undoing? From how they described wreaths of fire dazzling the sky, my imaginative mind wandered to dragons, although to this day the truth is still unknown to me. The den's fate was not the only thing documented, however. I turned back through the pages, finding each one filled with records of equipment and gold. Most entries were mundane, simply a purloined dagger or pouch of coins, more infrequently a gem or noble's jewelry. But one, in particular, drew my eye like a moth to a candle. I waved the others over, shepherding them back from where they had begun to disperse and explore the room, and shared my findings. By some miracle or twist of fate, one of the items listed, I explained animatedly to the group, matched the description of a helm lost to one of our superior officers many months prior. You may be familiar with the Helm of Brilliance, as it is known. Not quite mythical in status, but a rare item indeed, and the very one that the High Rider I speak of had lost. Or rather, misremembered its location, I should say, for that was how he insisted on phrasing it, after promising a considerable reward in exchange for any soldier who could assist him in remembering where he had stored it. The recollection of this promise now instilled a great deal of excitement within all of us, for, unlike the other entries that preceded the helm, there were no numbers attached to it. While the probability was slim, we conjectured there was a chance that in the chaos and panic of the thieves abandoning their hideout, the helm had been left behind. Casual exploration now turned into a focused hunt, digging through the disorderly piles of books that suffocated the floor, ransacking any furniture with drawers, and even clawing back the maps and letters plastered to the walls in the hopes of uncovering some hidden safe. We were insatiable, relentless, and as much as I would like to say it was solely out of loyalty, well, I needn't say any more than what I've told you. But find it we did, buried under rubble and a collapsed bookcase, several of its power-giving gems removed, the rest worn but otherwise intact. The metal was scratched, dented, and carbonized in places, but when we pulled it from the wreckage and inspected it with care, there on its crest remained the High Rider's name and rank, engraved with reverence. By dawn, the remaining miles we had left to cover before we breached the city gates felt like a mere skip and step with the helmet tucked in my pack. The winds were cool but refreshing, kissing our faces as we rode into the breeze. The morning sun clashing against our armor and enveloping us in a halo of light, which I fancied made us look rather heroic. Our horses' breath clouded the air as we pulled up sharply before the northern gate, their flanks shimmering with sweat, heavy snorting and hoof-pawing, muffled by the awakening church bells. We led them to the stables where they settled properly at last. As for us, we had one stop left to make before our barracks. Although the reward for the returned helm was grand and our promotions not far behind, all these years later, what I find myself remembering with the most detail is the salute. The first genuine salute I felt I had received as a young tiefling soldier. There, I hope that tale from an adventure long past was suitably intriguing and calming. If my rambling has helped you to settle even a little, then I am all the lighter for it. You're tired, I know, weary from all the battles you face, and yet still going, a persistent spark among the darkness. At times you might feel your light is weak, or jaded, or on your greyest days that it does not matter, or exist at all. But at any moment you may find your momentum at last, and then, my dear friend, that small spark of yours will turn into an almighty blaze, banishing the worst of the shadows that have tormented you for so long, and spreading the warmth and joy of 1,000 suns. And, to quote a legendary artist, if you are worth anything later, you are worth something now. For wheat is still wheat, even if people think it is grass in the beginning. So, no matter if you are currently running off of mere fumes, hold that knowledge close to your heart. Have faith, and believe I speak truth when I insist. You matter, not for who you can become, but for who you are now. Above all, as my voice continues to guide you into the deepest, most restful slumber, take comfort in knowing that you are not alone. Even when you feel broken or lost, you will always have family in the Hell Rider.